on this episode, we interview our GLBTQ liaisons to the Olympia Police Department. We wanted to say a few words to begin with because we realize that police are a very sensitive topic to most of America today, but in particular to the GLBTQ community, to communities of color, to low-income people, people with disabilities, and others who have historically had poor relations with the police, both in Olympia and throughout the country. We chose to interview our two guests because the Olympia Police Department has recently undertaken a lot of great strides in order to improve its relations with the GLBTQ community. Now, I realize this is still very controversial and very questionable to much of the community, and it has been a point of division for all kinds of for a great many people
for a great many reasons.
Yeah, but we here at Tea Time believe that all issues of concern to the GLBTQ community are things that we should comment on and bring to the attention of the community. So, whichever side of the issue you happen to fall on, we feel that this is an issue worth discussing. So we just wanted to give you that,
brief warning so that you can turn away if this is not an issue that you would like to watch or hear talked about. And this is your warning. If you don't want to hear or talk about it, then you can turn away for a half hour and come back, or you can fast forward and we will be back in a moment.
So with that, we take you to our episode with our GLBTQ liaisons from OPD. Thank you.
Enjoy.
I'm working at the Olympia City Jail. So I work with and support our LGBTQ liaisons just as an ally within the department, and partnered with them on a couple of projects through my relationship with the jail and making sure that we appropriately house and have relationship with all of our community.
Okay. So tell us a little more, Shelby, about how you came into the position of being the GLBTQ liaison and what exactly that entails. What are your duties as the liaison to the GLBTQ community in Olympia?
Certainly. So in 2014, we started with our first liaison to the community, and that was Lieutenant Bill Wilson. And when he retired, it became Sergeant Wren Emerson, and she brought me on board at the beginning of last year, at the beginning of 2016. And so we continued working to develop relationships with the community, a number of different facets within the LGBTQ community. And we're just trying to build relationships, trying to make sure that we have connections, and so when things go well, we hear about them, and when things don't go so well, we have those relationships that build the bridge for us to work towards solutions and rectify problems.
Okay. So in addition to building relationships, there are some policy changes, I understand, that have come before the department recently. And Chandra, I know as jail manager, you've been very instrumental in bringing in a new housing policy in the Olympia jail for transgender people. And Shelby, I guess you've also been involved in putting together the Safe Olympia program.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about the new policies for the jail housing.
So in 2015, we recognized that we, as a result of PREA, which is a federal law that gives us some pretty clear rules about how we'll house folks.
PREA is the Prison Rape Elimination Act.
Yes,
correct?
thank you. In response to that, we started looking at our own housing policies and how close or far away we were from compliance. And at the very same time, Sergeant Emerson was working with our LGBTQ community to just identify some gaps and see how we could have a better relationship or close some of those gaps between OPD and our LGBTQ community. And one of the things she found is that there was just a lack of trust, and that we really decided as a department that we wanted to build trust with that specific section of our community. So as we started working on the housing policy, recognizing that we would need some expertise that I just don't have, we reached out to a couple of members of our transgender community locally, and I always say I came up with what I thought was a pretty amazing draft of that policy that we were all just going to look at and give a head nod and say, good job, look forward to, putting into place. And we sat down, and I very quickly realized within 30 seconds that it belonged in the garbage, and we needed to just do a lot of work on learning respectful language and how to engage respectfully with our transgender men and women.
Okay. So tell us a little more about that process and what eventually came out of that.
Well, we looked at some policies that had come from lawsuits that come as a result of some DOJ lawsuits, and then we talked about best practices, and we really decided that the people who know best where they need to be housed are the people we're talking about housing. And it comes down to not just housing, but also how we talk to people, how we approach people, and just learning things like, hi, my name is Chandra and I prefer she, her pronouns, is an invitation for you to say, hi, my name is Luke, and to give me the information I need to be respectful. We also talk about pat downs, and in a jail setting, beyond the patrol setting, we also need to do strip searches. And so someone may be comfortable with a male officer performing a pat down, but if it came to doing a strip search, they would be more comfortable with a female officer. And so those are things that we walk through in our policy so that we can teach our staff how to be respectful, and so that by policy we're respectful of everyone in our community, including the transgender members of our community.
Okay. Shelby, tell us a little bit about the Safe Olympia program. As I understand it, that was modeled on a similar program from Seattle. Is that right?
That's exactly right. In 2015, Officer Jim Ritter in Seattle created the Safe Place Initiative in Seattle. And so Sergeant Emerson reached out to Jim and worked closely with him to make Olympia the second department in the nation to participate in this initiative. And so rather than Safe Place, we changed it to Safe Olympia. And it's a program where we work with our business members to create safe places for the LGBTQ community to remain if they're victimized. And so the business will contact law enforcement, and the LGBTQ member can remain on the property until law enforcement gets there. There's no obligation for the victim to prosecute or to even wait for law enforcement if they were to change their mind. So it just creates a safe place for community members to remain until help arrives.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about how the department policy concerning hate crimes. How does a person go about reporting a hate crime? How do you determine whether if an incident occurs, whether it is to be treated as a hate crime? What are people's rights, concerning that, and what policies apply to those kinds of situations?
So the most important thing when anybody's reporting any crime is to just report the facts as detailed as possible, and so to make sure that every single thing that transpired is reported to law enforcement. And so reporting a hate crime is no different than reporting any other crime. It's just very, very important that you stress those key factors that make up a hate crime. So what language was used? What was the suspect wearing that indicated that they might have a certain bias towards a certain population? And so once law enforcement investigates that, it could be determined at the patrol level, or it could end up being a case that needs further investigation and goes up to the detective division, which is where those elements will be considered and investigated even further. More interviews will be conducted, consulting with our prosecutors to find out if they believe that the elements have been met, and that's really the way those cases work.
Okay. Have you, since the Safe Olympia program was put in place, have you had many incidences? I mean, how is the program going? Are people making use of the safe places?
Could I share a story for that one?
Yeah, please do.
One of the really awesome things that we have happen is the opportunity to just work with families or individuals, and sometimes it's not positive, but sometimes it is. And we got a call probably about 4 or 5 months ago from a mother of an adult son, but he's a special needs son, so she's a little more involved in his life than maybe she might normally be. And she was just thanking us for the Safe Olympia program, and she said that her son can go online and look at our map of downtown and find the businesses that are participating with OPD in the Safe Olympia program, and knows that if he feels unsafe, that those are places he can go. So that's one example, an intent that we didn't necessarily have in mind when we decided to put the program in place that has been a positive outcome for our community.
Absolutely.
And one.
We've surveyed our businesses that we participate with to find out, to get some feedback as to whether or not it's been used, because as we said, there's no requirement that the victim remain on the premises.
Right.
And what we found is that to the best of the business's knowledge, the program's been used very little. But I don't think that there's a great way of measuring the success of the program right now, because a victim may go into a business knowing that they're not going to be further victimized, but not seek law enforcement assistance. So we've received a lot of positive feedback from the community, just seeing the relationship between our community, the police department, and our local businesses.
Okay. So if a person goes into a business that has a Safe Olympia sticker in the window, you know, to get away from a situation, the proprietor may or may not know that that's why they've entered?
Absolutely.
Okay, so there's no way of tracking then
It's
how
difficult
much
to
people
track.
are making use of it.
Yeah.
Okay. If someone does choose to contact law enforcement and wait for them to arrive, what can they expect from their interactions with officers? You mentioned, you know, that they should be able to describe the incident in detail. So what are the officers' obligations as far as how to interact with someone in that situation?
Well, really exciting is that at the beginning of 2017, we rolled out our transgender education to all of our patrol officers. And so language that may have fallen through the cracks and been missed by our patrol officers in the past won't occur now. They understand the little nuances in language to look for, because the community actually came together and helped train our officers. And so truly, when any member from the LGBTQ population reports to law enforcement, they just need to come like any other individual and just tell their story. And if there's unique factors to that story, like reporting a hate crime, they just need to make sure that they articulate it.
Okay. And I assume that extends, you know, beyond not necessarily just transgender people, but gay, lesbian, bisexual people, people with disabilities, people of color.
Yes.
You know,
Absolutely.
people who are maybe experiencing homelessness.
All of our community
Yeah.
members, visitors, it applies to everyone. It was specifically a partnership with our LGBTQ community, so we included the rainbow symbol on our sticker, and that's
Yeah.
certainly who we're doing the most education with around this program, but it certainly benefits and applies to everyone in the city of Olympia.
Absolutely.
Okay. So you recently held a training that I was present at for the officer corps concerning interaction with transgender individuals just in, you know, the everyday course of coming into contact with law enforcement, such as traffic stops or you know, whatever. Can you tell us a little bit about how those new policies came about, and you know, a little bit about how the training has gone, and how those policies are being received by the officers, and are they being implemented well?
Yeah, well, like I said, when we first started working on the housing policies, you start looking at housing and then you realize, oh, wow, strip search is going to have some special applications, and then you realize pat downs in the jail are going to have some special implications, and then, well, you know, when I was talking to Shelby, that applies to patrol pat downs as well, and then through our own interaction with the LGBT community, or at least mine, I won't speak for Shelby, I learned that I had a lot to learn about how to be respectful. And we're all taught that every conversation that starts with respect is going to end better, and it's going to happen in a more positive light. So just learning how to be respectful is so important. And so as I learned that, as I got that education, we collectively decided it would be a very beneficial thing to provide to our entire police department.
Yeah.
And started working on that. We worked on it for about a year. And you were involved, and there were some other members of our community involved. We decided that one of the best ways to teach people how to be respectful and who they were respecting was to bring some of those members of our community in to talk to us about how they prefer to be treated, and just realizing that it's moms and dads and brothers and sisters and the person at the gas station and the grocery store, and it makes it a whole lot easier to learn.
Yeah. Well, from what I remember being present at that training was that, I noticed that the officers, when we did the panel section and they had the opportunity to ask questions, were really asking all the same questions that anybody else would ask when first being introduced to, the concepts of gender diversity. And I was actually really impressed by the fact that they seemed very eager to, gain this new information. It seemed like they came with the right attitude and left with the knowledge that they needed to put that attitude into practice.
And we're very appreciative of the knowledge. From sitting on the sidelines and having been part of the project and then just watching it unfold, I remember at one point feeling like there had been so much fear on both sides. So there's some members of the LGBTQ community that are fearful of police because of this national historical dialogue. And then there were my coworkers who are fearful of saying the wrong thing and doing the wrong thing and just not really having a good understanding. And I feel like we did so much work that day in our community and in our law enforcement community, and just bridging that gap for both groups.
So do you have plans for ongoing, continuing education in this area? More, interface with the community and more forums in which, officers who feel like they need a little more knowledge can come and find that?
We definitely want to continue working with our LGBTQ community. We feel like we've just literally barely found the surface of that relationship, and that, we'll continue to be committed to that as we move forward. As far as continuing education within the department, I think that's important because, as you know, it's a constantly changing field, and so where certain things are best practice, and one day you can go out the next month and find out that that's not really the best way to address someone anymore. So we'll certainly provide updates as we can, and I don't know that we really have a plan, but I'm sure that one will develop.
Yeah. Like I said, that initial training I think went very well, but it's such a big area that it's really impossible to cover it all.
Right.
In just a few hours,
Right.
on
Well,
a
we
weekend morning.
when you look at LGBTQ, we just barely
yeah.
touched the tip of the iceberg on the letter T.
Yeah.
It's very true.
Yeah.
Just to reiterate, our officers were so hungry for the knowledge. As a liaison, I would communicate regularly with patrol, and they would have so many questions, and so I'd try to educate them as much as I could as time allowed before the next hot call would come out, and I would just tell them, the training is going to cover this and so much more. And they were so wanting of the knowledge because they want to be respectful of the community, to the community, and with the community, just not knowing how. So I think there's a continued desire for education, and they of course always know that they can reach out to the liaisons, and we'll involve them in our community participation as well.
And the liaisons in turn can reach out to the community.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So what are some of the biggest challenges you've encountered, either in like putting the jail policy in place or, in your capacity as liaison? What are some of the hurdles you've had to overcome in fulfilling those roles.
There's so many niches within the LGBTQ community, and being able to reach as many of them as possible, I have found challenging, as well as, understandably so, some of the niches of the community don't want to partner with law enforcement. And like Chandra said, we understand the history, we understand the fear. We just really believe that through dialogue and partnership, hopefully we can move forward. We understand that we can't rewind the past, but just move forward. And then I think the other difficult thing is we have a number of people in our community who are really difficult to reach. So we know that our homeless youth, we have a lot of LGBTQ members among them, and they're very difficult for us to reach. Because they may not attend school, so they don't maybe go to Pizza Clutch. You know, they might not be as well connected with some of the community groups that we're working with. And so I think that's a continued challenge that for me, it's important to build that bridge.
And of course, those that are connected to certain organizations that serve homeless youth, for example, or homeless GLBTQ youth, you know, those organizations aren't always, you know, their philosophies may make it difficult for them to have positive interactions with law enforcement and other, you know, social institutions.
Very true.
You know.
Well, there are some of the social service agencies, understandably, in order to feel like a safe place for people to come, don't want to be having police there often, because then maybe people wouldn't feel safe in going for those places. And we certainly don't want to interfere with the feeling of safety and security for those folks. We just have to find a way to meet them halfway so that we can build those relationships. Also, when you talk about the belief systems, the other belief system that kind of slowed us down a little bit, or it was an opportunity to overcome a hurdle, is some of the housing stuff. You know, when for decades and decades you've been trained that there's a certain way to house people, and that if you break that rule that someone's going to get hurt. When you start introducing new concepts, even though they're valid, even though you know them to be true, it's still, that first step is hard to take. You know, the first time we walked through this policy and came up with a solid housing decision based on the policy that was different than what we might have done last year or 10 years ago in the corrections industry, it's a scary step to take. But we have done it, and it has worked out well for us every single time.
Good. So it seems to me that, you know, maybe one of the biggest challenges to be overcome is simply the force of history, really.
Absolutely.
You know, now I'm a little bit biased because I'm a historian and an anthropologist, so I tend to look at everything in a historical context. But, you know, one of the things I was asked to do in that training was to talk a little bit about the history between law enforcement and, you know, the GLBTQ community, which, you know, has not always been a particularly comfortable one.
Absolutely.
You know, and of course, there are a lot of people in the community for whom the police are just always going to be the enemy because, you know, they can't conceive of it being otherwise.
Right.
So do you have ideas for, you know, strategies to address that particular hurdle?
Personally, I think the most important part of overcoming that obstacle is of just being people, of being human beings. And when you sit down and have a cup of coffee, or you have a conversation about your family, or about what you had for dinner last night, or that's a connection that takes away some of the fear sometimes. One of the things that the police department is committed to doing is to building that relationship and being consistent in that. And so when, as you know, when there have been rough points or points where we weren't able to see eye to eye, or maybe we weren't able to connect with someone because they weren't ready, we have just kept coming back, and we will continue to just keep coming back in a friendly relationship building way, and not in a scary or intimidating sort of way. We've adjusted some of our own practices. 5 or 10 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago, you wouldn't have seen police officers showing up at community meetings without being in uniform. When people tell us it's intimidating for us when you show up in uniform,
Right.
then we are willing to make that accommodation, because we don't want to be intimidating. We want to build relationship. We want to work together. And so we're learning.
For me, it all comes down to communication, and so I think we just need to have a lot more engagement with the community. We, as a police department, have done a lot of community conversations with certain facets in our community, and I think it would be fantastic to host some of those conversations with the LGBTQ community, to really have an open dialogue and to allow people to express some of these fears. And I know it's very difficult, but we just need to give each other the benefit of positive intent moving forward. And that doesn't always mean that we're going to get it right, but it means that we just need to communicate, and so we can figure out what the next step looks like.
Yeah. I remember back when Bill Wilson was the GLBTQ liaison, we had a Trans Day of Remembrance event in Olympia at which he spoke afterwards. And I remember him in particular saying that one of the things that he had to really examine in himself when he took on that job was the fact that he came from police culture, and that was something he had to, sort of overcome, and the assumptions, I guess, that go along with that. Have you seen like a big change as far as the culture of
Absolutely. Absolutely. So starting about 5 years ago, we had a mass exodus of employees at OPD. So we'd hired a lot of employees in the 1980s, and those employees were retiring out. And so I believe the number is somewhere in the line of 34, 35 employees that we've hired as officers in the last 5 years. And the bulk of them are millennials. And they bring in a different culture into the police department. And so when we talk about LGBTQ, it's something that we, although they're hungry for the right language, they embrace the individuals already. And so it's a huge change in police culture. And we're working, we've educated the entire police department in what we call Blue Courage, which is about self-help, about acknowledging police culture, what it looked like historically and what it looks like now. So we've done a lot of education with the department.
Tell us more about that. What kind of specific changes in attitude, apart from just like being willing to embrace maybe a more diverse community, what do you see as some of the biggest, maybe, I don't know, psychological changes, perhaps, for lack of a better term, that younger officers maybe are bringing?
I would maybe
the
call it
job?
self-awareness.
Okay.
And like you talk about diversity, not just being able to embrace the diversity in our community, but being able to embrace diversity amongst our team. I think some of the changes we're seeing in society and our community as a whole are also reflected in our smaller community that is the police department.
Absolutely. I think more self-regulation, emotional intelligence is something that we're really focusing on with our new hires. Really taking a look at yourself before you put on the uniform, assessing how's your day been thus far? How might it affect your day on patrol? Is it a day that you might want to not be as proactive because you're not your best? And to be constantly mindful of your contacts with the community.
Okay, all right. So what are your hopes or plans for the future in just improving relationships with the GLBT community and the Olympia community in general? We talked a little bit about possibilities for ongoing education and relationship building. What would you like to see, say, 10 years down the road in terms of how the police and the community relate to each other?
Well, one of the things that happened a few weeks ago that was very encouraging and that we took as a sign that we have made some progress is someone in the LGBT community heard a rumor about, I think it was a hate crime or something that had happened to an LGBTQ victim, and I got an email about it. So they had emailed and asked, hey, is this true? What happened with this situation? What can you tell me? And so whereas a year, maybe 6 months ago, that wouldn't have been the case, it was kind of a proud moment for us because we felt like they knew they could reach out, they felt comfortable reaching out, and they trusted us that they would get an answer. So as far as my hopes for the future, it is that every member of our local or visiting LGBTQ community in Greater Olympia would feel the same way and know how to contact us and trust contacting us. And maybe even not just our LGBTQ liaisons or somebody that they see working on a transgender policy, but any member of our police force or corrections team or somebody at the front desk.
Okay. So just opening up the lines of communication,
Yeah.
you know, making people accessible.
Right, and building a relationship with our LGBTQ community so that they trust that that their membership in that community is absolutely irrelevant to us. We're going to treat them as any other member of the community, and that's really what we want for every member of our community.
For me, again, it comes back to communication. I think giving the police department the opportunity to respond to certain events. So I know I've worked with one community member and they had a perception of the way that a call was handled, and being able to work with the officer, find out exactly what happened from dispatch all the way through the call. It really helped to have a conversation with that individual, the victim in that case. And so they really understood what this looked like from point go to point end. And it really helped to improve the knowledge of how policing works and certainly clear up some misconceptions. So I'd like to see that communication grow, both between us and the community to the police department. And then I'd like to celebrate the relationship. So I'd like to really see the police department be involved in community events and to see that participation celebrated by both members, the community and the police department.
Okay. So what message would you like to send to our viewers or, you know, to the community at large?
Certainly.
As far as, you know, like...
Yeah, we're here for you.
Okay.
We are a police department that wants to engage in communication. We want to serve you. We want you to feel safe in this community. If you don't, we need to know particulars about why you don't feel safe, where you don't feel safe, if there's a specific incident. If you have a concern, please share it with us, and so we can do that investigative work into figuring out what exactly happened. And just know that we're here for you, and we consider ourselves a part of the community.
And we actively seek out opportunities to do that and to be part of the community. But we're certainly open to invitations and ideas for how we can do a better job in engaging the community at large and our LGBTQ community specifically.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you both very much for being with us. Chandra Brady, Shelby Nutter, and thank you for watching Tea Time Olympia.
And welcome back to Tea Time in Olympia. I'm Amy Layton.
And I'm Lucas Miller. And we'd like to thank you for joining us while we interviewed our OPD liaisons to the GLBTQ community, Detective Shelby Nutter and Officer Chandra Brady. Recently, Amy and I went to
Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Yes, Minneapolis, Minnesota, to attend the annual conference of the Alliance for Community Media, who was kind enough to give us an award.
Yeah, they gave us an award, and shout out to the Alliance for Community Media. Thank you again for covering our room and our registration fees. That was really awesome. We learned a lot. I know I did, and I know you did too.
Yep.
There we go. There's the award.
We have the Jewel Ryan White Award for Cultural Diversity is presented to Amy Layton, Stacy Layton, Lucas Miller, and Melissa Miller for Tea Time in Olympia.
For
outstanding contribution to a process that encourages, facilitates, or creates culturally diverse involvement in the field of community media. for 2017. So
And
we're
it was
kind
an
of,
honor. It
as
was
you
an
can tell, we're kind of proud of this. Well, what was your favorite experience at the conference in Minneapolis?
I would have to say the plenary luncheon or breakfast that we went to the morning that after that we got there. That was a pretty good experience. I learned a lot about community media across this country and a
Yeah.
lot from the directors and different kind of styles of directing and ways of going about that. And it was pretty awesome. But I mean, that was a pretty good part. But my favorite was the party the night that we got there. That for Tightrope Media.
Yeah.
They had a big office party. We had gotten off the plane and we dropped everything off at the hotel and we went to the party to kind of get something to eat and be around people and kind of experience
Yep.
stuff. And it was really great. There were lots of great people. Everyone was pretty friendly, I gotta say. I was expecting a little bit of pushback, being trans, but I was really surprised about how friendly everybody was.
Everybody was
and-
very, very welcoming. Yeah, everybody was really interested in hearing about the work we do and how we produce the show, how we find our guests. We got a lot of really good, interesting feedback from people who do similar kinds of projects
across the country.
and work in other areas of community media all over the country. So we got to connect with a lot of people who've been doing this for quite a bit longer than we have, and had some really valuable advice to give. We attended some really informative workshops.
What was your favorite, Luke?
Well, I have to say I really enjoyed the workshop on narrative filmmaking, where not only did I get to speak to a filmmaker from Northampton, Massachusetts, where I used to live. So that was kind of nice to hear a voice from back home.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, but one of the other filmmakers at that workshop, who goes by the name of Prince, works out of Schenectady, New York, if I recall correctly, and has done documentary films working with youth, and dramatic films, including some about, for example, the issue of unwanted teen pregnancies and the issues faced by low-income youth or youth growing up in economically depressed areas. Had some very inspiring things to say. And was just quite a charismatic speaker to listen to, I have to say. He was very articulate and a lot of the things he said were really illuminating and inspiring. So that was probably one of the most memorable workshops I went to.
I really wish I would have been able to sit in on that
unfortunately
one.
that workshop was packed. We got there a little late and there were just
One seat open and
which I kind of jumped on.
sharing stories. That was
Yeah.
that was the resounding theme of the whole conference, was sharing stories. And
Yes.
we all shared a little bit of our stories, and I must say it was very unique seeing so many stories in one spot in such a short period of time.
Yeah.
That it was like this big burst that just filled my brain with all these new information and new ideas, and it was just really awesome to meet so many of these people as well and hear their stories in person and learn a little bit about each person. And
I have to say I was really amazed at how interested they were in hearing our stories.
Yeah. No, that really intrigued me as well. I mean, not every trans person, but I know I certainly am affected by the voice in my head saying you're not good enough, you're not doing anything worthy of attention or helping anybody, and to be told by so many people that what we were doing was worth it and was helping and inspiring to them, it really gave me a big boost of confidence.
Yeah.
And I got to say, it was really awesome to experience that. I know that you had prepared a speech to kind of say when we went up to get the award, and I wasn't able to prepare a speech. I just couldn't write
Well,
one down.
Well,
And Deb got up there and had her proud mama moment and
She
really
did.
gave us a really good introduction. And
yeah.
all I remember is going up on stage,
Mm-hmm.
you doing your speech, and me doing mine, and then everybody standing up and giving us this big standing ovation, which I
Yeah.
had never experienced before in my
Right.
entire life. I mean, outside of elementary school, and they give you your 5th grade graduation or, ceremony thing.
Which I'm much too old to remember.
Well, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
But it was great,
Yeah.
good people, good food, good atmosphere. I didn't, I
Yes.
don't know about you, but I did experience a little bit of harassment while in Minneapolis. It wasn't at the conference from anyone at the conference
Right.
at all,
Yeah.
but it was from some of the people that were living in the area or visiting the area that
Mm-hmm.
would make snide
Just
comments
people on the
here
street.
and there. Yeah,
Yeah.
people on the street,
Yeah.
It was kind of rude at times, but I kind of adopted this screw it attitude.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, screw it, I'm 1,000 miles away from home. I'm not going to let this break me,
Right.
Not here. And so I kind of had a smart aleck attitude.
Well, not to mention the fact that, we were at a conference of, like a few hundred people or so that, almost certainly would have had our backs if anything had
happened.
if anything, violent had occurred or anything like that. Yeah, so I really enjoyed meeting all the people at the conference who were involved in projects, along the lines of what we do, and being able to connect with people who've been in the media profession for a long
Decades.
time and had a lot of good feedback to offer us. And once again, we'd like to, offer a shout out to the folks who made it possible for us to go.
We'd like to thank the Alliance for Community Media for sponsoring us in our room and our registration fees.
And we'd like to thank Pflag of Olympia for
Helping
kicking in a
Luke
grant
get
for our airfare.
And we'd also like to thank TC Media for covering my airfare. And they did cover a couple of our rides and meals.
Yes,
Because they were
yes,
very,
they
very
did.
sweet. Thank you.
Yes.
And thank you, Deborah. And thank you so much, Andrea, for nominating us. And thank you, Deb, for making sure that we could get there and accept this in person. That was
Yeah,
a really
yeah.
great experience, and I will never forget it.
Yeah, that was really a very, very life-changing moment, I think, and I think it's inspired us to come home and really, develop this show more,
Yep.
and really explore the reaches of what we can do with a wonderful resource like Thurston Community Media. And yeah, we had a really great time, and once again, very proud to accept this award on behalf of all of us,
On behalf of all of us, yeah.
and look forward to a great new season of Tea Time in Olympia. And thanks very much.
Hello, I would like to make a special shout out to my mother, Stacy Layton, who won this year's Pflag of Olympia Steve Mast Advocacy Award. And I am very, very proud of her, and it was an honor to nominate her. And I just wanted to say, congratulations, Mom. I love you, and you deserve this so much.
Thank you very much, Stacy, for all your work as producer on Tea Time in Olympia, and for keeping us all organized and on track.
She's the level head when we all run around.
Which is
without
not
her.
an easy job, believe me. The Steve Mast Advocacy Award was established in the name of Steve Mast, who was a former member of Pflag of Olympia. Steve was the father of a trans man and did a lot of work with Pflag, working to help other parents accept their transgender children.
And spread awareness and education
yeah.
surrounding trans youth and how we can better help them along
Yeah.
their journey.
Yeah. Steve, unfortunately, took his own life in
2014, I believe, or no, 2015.
2015, I think. And so Pflag of Olympia established this award in his memory. Last year's recipient was Juliet Knight, who co-facilitates the support group for parents of trans and gender nonconforming children.
Here in Olympia, third
Yeah.
Sunday of every
Third
month.
Sunday of every month at the Westminster Presbyterian Church, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. And this year's recipient is our very own Stacy Layton. So
And we are
we'd
so
like
proud.
to say congratulations, and we're very proud and thank you again very much.
So, Luke, it is coming up on school time again, and I know of Pizza Clatch. I've heard of Pizza Clatch through
yep.
the show and through a few other people as well. Could you tell us a little bit about what Pizza Clatch is? And
Certainly, yeah. Pizza Clatch is a local nonprofit that operates right here in the Olympia, Lacey, Tumwater area.
okay,
And basically what we do is we go into area high schools and provide lunchtime support groups for gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, intersex youth and their allies. We go in during the lunch hour so that young people can join us without having to account for time outside of school.
okay,
We provide pizza because they're spending their lunch hour with us instead of going to the cafeteria. And basically we provide a safe, non-judgmental space with qualified facilitators for young people who want to discuss issues of gender and sexuality, emotional difficulties, suicide, bullying, harassment, anything, what's going on at home, all the usual stress around school, anything that is, on the minds of our young people in a space in which they know they will always be accepted, without regard to their gender identity or gender presentation or their sexual orientation.
a come as you are kind of
Yes.
half
exactly.
hour
Yep.
each week.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah, we provide 2 trained facilitators
Okay.
once a week for each of the schools that we're in, and we're currently in, I believe it's 11 or 12 schools, all the ones in Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater, as well as we're in Tenino and Rainier
Oh.
and South Sound High School.
Okay.
And
So
we're hoping that we will soon be starting in Yelm High School and possibly also Shelton. So
Oh,
we're
wow.
looking to expand our area. We're also talking about the possibility of starting groups in middle schools as well.
oh wow, I think that would be a great opportunity.
Yeah.
Because there are so many youth that just need that
Yeah,
support, need
yeah.
to know that they are heard for who they are, and not, I'm not saying parents
Right.
just discredit their children, but you know what I mean.
Well, one of the reasons we operate during the lunch hour is so that young people who may not be in supportive family situations are able to access the group, without having to let anyone know where they're going. We also we include allies because, of course, allies are very much welcome, but also that people who aren't really ready to be out yet can come
as an ally, if they
if
choose
they
to.
just want to, check out the group and see what it's all about. If they're still questioning or unsure about their sexual orientation or gender identity, they have a sort of a cover in which to access that safe space, so that they can explore further.
Okay, so let's see. Is there a way that they could find out where or if their school has a Pizza Clatch? The students,
We advertise our presence in the school. We have
Okay.
we have posters. Some of the schools will announce that Pizza Clatch is going on, with their morning PA announcements.
Okay.
We also have a website,
Okay.
pizzaclatch.org. We have some social media set up. I think we have a presence on Twitter, and what's the other? Facebook.
Okay.
We have some youth coordinators who take care of that,
Okay.
so that young people can connect with each other through Pizza Clatch, outside of school if they want to. We have an annual fundraising gala that we hold at the Washington Center for the Performing Arts every year.
Okay.
This one is going to be, I believe, Saturday, February 3rd.
Don't quote you on that, right?
Yeah, well, that first Saturday in February, we're going to be having our next gala.
Okay.
And people can buy tickets online or purchase them at the Washington Center. And of course, we are always looking for volunteers.
Okay, I was going to ask about that.
Yep, we will soon be. Each year we have a 2-day training session for new facilitators. We look for both full-time facilitators who are able to commit to approximately 2 hours a week, as well as backup or substitute facilitators for whom, who can step in if a regular facilitator is sick or unavailable.
Okay.
That's a less of a time commitment if people want to do that. But we do provide a 2-day training session so that people go in with an understanding of, for example, how to address bullying issues, or what to do if a student seems to be potentially suicidal.
Good.
What the resources are if for example, if you need to report a situation of abuse or something like that. We make sure that our facilitators have all those resources.
Okay.
And we have ongoing trainings throughout the years. We've had, for example, the Trevor Foundation come in and do an extensive training on suicide prevention and bullying.
Okay.
We coordinate with the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. We work in tandem with the GSAs that already exist in the schools.
GSA stands for Gay
Straight Alliance,
Okay.
or in some cases, Queer Straight Alliance, whatever the case may be in a particular school. But the GSAs and QSAs are more oriented toward activism and organizing, whereas
Okay.
Pizza Klatch is pure support.
Okay.
Basically, we just, for a half hour, once a week, we create a space where people can talk about whatever's going on with them.
Well, and I believe that those places are so important. Mm-hmm. And thank you
Yeah.
very much for coming and for sharing that with us.
Yeah. So if you're interested in getting involved with Pizza Klatch, please check out our website at pizzaclatch.org. We will have an upcoming training session this September. You can find application materials on the website. Mm-hmm. So if you're interested in being a facilitator or helping out with our gala, please get in touch with us.
Yeah, thank you very much for watching today's show, and we hope to see you next month.